All right, everyone. Thank you for coming. We're about ready for our next session. I don't know if you noticed that some cacti appeared on the stage, but that's because it is now time for Between Two Cacti with Marilu Hastings from the Cynthia George Mitchell Foundation, where she is the Executive Vice President. She's also chair of our advisory board at the Energy Institute here at UT Austin. And we also have Brian Korgel, Director of the Energy Institute. Take it away.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone, for coming to another Between Two Cacti. So I've got Marilu Hastings. So she's Executive Vice President of the Cynthia George Mitchell Foundation, Director of the Mitchell Innovation Lab. So I get really nervous before these. So last night I was preparing, and so I went on ChatGPT, and I was like, all right, when you're interviewing a bigwig, how do you start? Like, how can you just start the interview and get over, your nerves and everything? And so ChatGPT said, oh, ask some friendly questions. And I was like, well, like what? Like, give me examples. So one of the ones that ChatGPT said was, ask your person, are you a circle or a square? ChatGPT told me.
So you're asking me?
Yeah. Well, that's what ChatGPT told me.
I was waiting for the big wig to come out.
No, yeah, that's you. Circle or square?
I'm a circle.
Okay, me too. Apparently you don't work in finance.
I do not.
If you were here yesterday, it's an inside joke. But anyway, are you Kiki or Booba? So this is Kiki over here, and this is Booba. Kiki or Booba?
Kiki, because that looks like a doodle I would make.
Kiki's supposed to look a lot more spiky, so it looks too cute. So I think I messed up Chat, but anyway, Kiki, okay.
So what is Kiki and what is Boo Boo? What's the difference?
It's a ChatGPT thing. I think it's
There's not an interpretation like.
I think it says a lot about your
yeah.
soul somehow, but I don't completely know. And then it gave me this weird one. It was gave me this image of something called Tobo, and apparently it's a robot AI prototype, and it said, ask you if it's made of metal or marshmallow.
Metal.
All right. That's what I think too.
The first thing I thought, anyway.
Well, it's a robot AI prototype, and then the last thing it gave me, I really don't understand, what this is all about, but
I do.
Do you really?
Making energy great again.
Wow! Look at that.
Like megawatt.
Like megawatt. Wow. ChatGPT. Okay, so now that we've done that.
My own personal ice-breaking session.
Yeah. Well, I'm just going to dive into it. So Texas is supposed to anticipated to double the load on the energy grid. What are your thoughts about that?
Wow.
From as a philanthropist who thinks about energy leadership, and Marilu is the chair of the advisory board for the Energy Institute, and what I've gotten to know over the years is that everybody in our region looks to Marilu for leadership in energy. Whether they agree with it or not, but they're like, what does Marilu think? What's happening in energy? And in the Energy Institute itself, the Mitchell Foundation funded our geothermal report, something called the Permian Dialogue, Permian Energy Development Lab, major initiatives that are really important for our region. And we talk a lot about this issue of doubling the load in 5 years. So from your perspective, how do we think about that?
So can I back up a little bit and just mention, so the Mitchell Foundation, you all might know Mr. Mitchell was an early pioneer in shale development, applied existing technologies of hydraulic fracturing and directional drilling into hard rock shale formations. Thus, the new sort of energy what do they call it, the shale revolution or some such thing. So he was equally interested in issues of sustainability. And so when he and Mrs. Mitchell set up the foundation and then endowed it, they're both deceased now, he said, and our bylaws say that the foundation will be focused on issues of sustainability in the state of Texas. So we have 2 energy programs, one clean energy and one subsurface energy. Not that subsurface can't be clean, but we distinguish it as sort of above ground energy issues, the grid, transmission, et cetera, and subsurface, which originally was oil and gas, but now, of course, is geothermal and CCUS. We have a water science and policy program, a land conservation program, and a sustainability education program, which is really focused on UT. And then I run the innovation lab, which is not just energy. So I would say, first off, in my response, that the Mitchell Foundation is not just, we're not climate funders. We're not carbon dioxide molecule accountants. We are not singularly focused on reducing greenhouse gases. We look at it more systematically. So we look at land impacts and water impacts overall, both impacts of energy on water and impacts of water on energy, and they are closely aligned. And so, of course, are the land issues. In terms of energy intensity, how much land and water do different energy types consume or require? So on the demand question, with the growing expected growth in data center demand, well, I should say first, you mentioned some of the things that we've funded here at UT. We have commissioned a study by Michael Weber and Josh Rhodes here at UT to answer that question. And the report is drafted but embargoed, so I won't spoil their big headline that they'll have, but it's clearly going to depend on where the investment goes. And we all know what drives investment, but it's going to be some combination of renewables and probably definitely natural gas. There's going to have to be a tremendous investment in transmission lines. If you think about the grid that we have and how long it took to develop it and the amount of money, like in the new CREZ lines, not new, but what's it been, 15 years, 20 years? We have to double that capacity in 5 years, while if you look at what the legislature is doing right now while addressing a water crisis in 5 years. So the legislature is putting $30 billion in new energy sources and addressing water infrastructure and water loss. So finally, after decades of knowing it, they're finally saying what we've always known is true, that in 5 years, parts of this state will not have any water. So we're addressing a possibly doubling load on the grid of energy demand with no water to support it. And you can't make energy without water. There's no energy type that doesn't require water or that doesn't require land. So as you heard in the panel before, natural gas and oil development produces a lot of water. It's unusable right now, but there are technologies to help address the contamination, as probably not anytime soon to be usable for human consumption, but can it displace some other types of, other uses that we have for water, primarily energy production, because you can't run a natural gas plant without water. So the next 5 years are going to be critical, not just for how do you meet demand growth on energy, but how do you do it in an increasingly water scarce environment.
Yeah, I mean, it's a serious topic for sure. I think when we talk about energy, as a society right now, I think people generally agree on what the challenges are. Like, if you go out to the Permian Basin and you ask people, what do you think some of the major challenges are? Water always rises to the top. It doesn't matter what political affiliation you are and that sort of thing. But certain words like decarbonization, energy transition seem to be trigger words. I mean, what are your thoughts on decarbonization, energy transition?
Important. One could argue that we're not doing either one. We sometimes argue that at the Mitchell Foundation, like it'll be great when we start decarbonizing and transitioning, but we do produce more with less carbon than we have. I mean, the trend line has been down for a long time. We produce more with less energy than we ever have. But I point out, because those two words have become very politicized, but if you look back over history of human society, we have always decarbonized. We're a wily species, always very innovative, always trying to figure out how to do things cheaper or faster or with fewer resources. And the first person who threw a piece of wood on a fire instead of animal dung started decarbonizing. And the person who figured out to use coal instead of wood, or oil instead of coal, or natural gas instead of coal, the person who started using wind, which is not a new technology at all, solar at scale, the first person who figures out how to make hydrogen at scale, which is not going to be a person, it's going to be a group of people. All the nuclears, all of those things are decarbonized, and decarbonization, and it's 5,000 years old or so. I don't know how old it is, but we have always been on a trend to decarbonize. We can't help it as a species to figure out how to do the next cool thing with technology. The energy transitions take 60 years. We're in one, I guess. You could say we're not. You could say we've kind of started, but not at scale. And do we have 60 years? Do we have 5 years? Everything's more urgent than it has been. It feels like. So it's not a transition that we might or might not be undertaking right now is not a new trend either. The people that lost their jobs not picking up horse manure off the street because we had cars were equally miserable to the people that you hear now who are losing their jobs because we're using natural gas instead of coal or something. It is the same thing that has happened for hundreds of years as we change from one technology to another, and it's certainly not isolated to energy. Who's unhappy that we have transitioned from not using anesthesia for surgery to not having to be awake during that ordeal? Who doesn't love their iPhone rather than their rotary phone? And no one is crying about it. So all technologies transition because, again, we are a species that can't help but innovate.
So speaking of that, you were born in Midland, Texas, I think, right? And the child of someone who worked in the oil and gas industry. You and I have spent a lot of time thinking about the Permian Basin and how important it is to the energy economy, not only in Texas and New Mexico, but the United States and really the world. When we think about energy, the future of energy, what's happening now and what will happen, what are your thoughts on the Permian Basin?
Well, I wasn't born there, but yes, I went to school there.
Where were you born? This whole time I thought you were born in Midland.
Well, some people say I'm a native, but technically that means I was born there. But I consider it my hometown, but I was born in Oklahoma City.
Oh, wow. Whoa. Okay, I think you can still stay director of, or chair of the advisory board, but...
At least it wasn't Norman.
Okay, but, well, you made your way to Midland, right?
Yes, so my dad was a petroleum engineer, so I grew up in all the towns, went to elementary school in Denver, spent a year in Plano, and then went to sixth grade through high school in Midland.
The most important years.
The most formative years.
Formative, yeah.
In a bad way and in a good way. I am a little rough around the edges, and that's because that's the West Texan in me. So when my parents moved us there, I don't know, let's pretend I'm this old and say it was 50 years ago. I don't know exactly when it was, but that's good enough. They would not have moved us. I'm sorry if anyone's from the Permian Basin. I love it in an odd kind of way. My parents did live there for 40 years. They're both deceased now, but I went off to college and never lived there again, but my parents lived there for 40 years. But I don't think my parents would have moved us there, my sister and I, for school if it was then the way it is now. Can I say that without offending anyone? It's still a great place for people to have jobs and to make money, but the quality of the education, healthcare, infrastructure is not what it used to be. So I've asked myself for a long time why that is, and the closest I can come, so 30,000 people a week commute into the Permian Basin to work from Houston to Dallas. They fly, let's say, Southwest Airlines, and they get on their plane Monday morning, and they get there and they work, and they fly home Friday. So to Dallas or Houston because they're raising their kids there, or they're looking for a spouse, or whatever bright, shiny engineer wants to meet someone bright and shiny in Houston or Dallas, and they're not going to move to the Permian Basin. So what this has led to is a lack of investment. People don't vote there because they don't live there. They don't buy homes. They don't invest in the schools because their children don't go there. They don't get health care there, so they don't demand better, et cetera. So what you've seen is a decline in well-being, and yet it is, as the largest oil and gas producer and a massive, I don't know what it ranks right now in renewables, but the major producer of renewables and oil and gas in the country, and yet there's a great deal of wealth produced from there for executives and shareholders, which is the role of the private sector, of course, and yet where is the investment in those communities? And then you add boom and bust onto that and the extremes, and they get each boom and each bust is more extreme than the last. Although it's been pretty stable now, and there's all sorts of geopolitical reasons for that in terms of price. I don't know what's happening today. So what you see is a great deal of wealth being produced and a great deal of decline in well-being there, that then they are more exposed to booms and busts. And make no mistake, a boom is as hard on the people out there as the bust. And so what Brian and I and others at UT and others around the country actually have been working on is establishing the Permian Energy Development Lab, or PEDL, to look at how you create more energy types, that the Permian is perfectly well suited. It has a massive capacity for carbon storage. It has some geothermal, not great geothermal, but some. Obviously, oil and gas. It has a potential for hydrogen production. It also has some challenges. There's a produced water problem that you guys heard about in the last panel. There's more water produced per unit of energy by far. Michael Weber here at UT likes to say that oil and gas companies are actually water companies with a high-end byproduct. So what we see in the pedal, in establishing the pedal, is a way to create an integrated energy system. So you're not just producing more oil and gas, you're not just producing geothermal over here, fossil over here, renewables over here, maybe some hydrogen over there. You're linking them all together, which enables you, if they're co-located, it enables you to use a waste stream, say produced water, cleaned up to some appropriate level with, say, a microgrid powered with natural gas and renewables, to run an electrolyzer, to clean your produced water, to use it for, say, hydrogen production or land restoration or agrivoltaics. You sell that hydrogen as ammonia, you ship it to Amarillo where there's a fertilizer plant, they make fertilizer out of it, and they ship it back to the county where we're building Petal, which uses more fertilizer per acre than any county in the United States. So you have could be net negative oil and natural gas, creating net negative ammonia, creating net negative fertilizer that is then being shipped 100 miles instead of across the country to help Yoakum County in its agricultural, whatever its agriculture endeavors are. So by way of doing that, you're creating a workforce. So you develop a workforce that can actually run this high-tech, because it is high-tech energy types, and you're investing back in the community for economic development and helping them both shave off the peaks and the valleys of the boom and bust, long-term investment in the community that brings those folks back up so that they can enjoy the wealth that they're producing for everyone else.
So the Mitchell Foundation's been a very important philanthropic partner for UT, Energy Institute. I mean, how do you see the role of philanthropy fitting into everything that needs to be done for society, energy, the connection back with, say, universities, and especially maybe now with the change in administration?
So philanthropy is like the man behind the curtain. So when you hear about, it doesn't matter, healthcare, arts, certainly climate or energy or any of the environmental issues, any nonprofit endeavor is funded by some philanthropist or some philanthropic foundation in the background. And those philanthropies drive a lot of the strategies and activities of those nonprofits. So in climate and energy philanthropy, there's a spectrum sort of perspectives. Most climate funders want to see a 100% renewable energy system worldwide, and they are adamant about it. We're the Mitchell Foundation. We call ourselves, there's a small group of foundations that we call ourselves the Pragmatic Climate Funders Group. We're science-based. we fund what we call research to action, or research, knowledge to policy, or something like that. We're really in the middle, where we fund, say, UT, not so much research for the sake of research, although that's important, because without that we don't have anything to base any decisions on. But we we call it knowledge to action or whatever. So it's where the scientific endeavor meets, say, policy or corporate decision making or public education. It's where those two areas meet. So you translate the knowledge created in academia to make it of practical use for decision makers. We're agnostic about electrons. We don't like one electron better than the other. We think that philanthropy is only part of the equation. Mr. Mitchell, even though it's a misnomer, but he's called the father of fracking and all this, which he wasn't, but he might be the father of shale. But anyway, he couldn't have done what he did without Department of Energy funding. He wouldn't have been able to persevere because it cost him a great deal of money. He was ridiculed. Everyone thought he was nuts. But without the DOE investment at the beginning to help him in that technology, so the private sector and public sector money together gave the resources that he could, so that he could finally unlock the code to shale development. So the partnership between philanthropy and public sector, because some of these questions, these technology questions, of course the private sector has its own role. It's their technologies, it's their market. They have an incentive to create it and to address the problem and the demand. But philanthropy, there's no capacity within philanthropy to develop, and Brian, you and I talk about this a lot. There's infinite need and finite resources. So philanthropy needs partnerships with corporations and with the public sector in order to address any critical question, whether it's health research, energy research, water research. It's all critical.
Maybe we have 1 minute. Can you brag on the Energy Institute for a second?
So everyone should value the Energy Institute. But so UT is so uniquely positioned to lead whatever we might think of as the so-called energy transition. The energy transition is going to happen, those challenges are going to be addressed in the Permian Basin. There's no doubt about it. Those technologies, the key questions, the critical research, the solutions, the technology testing and perfection, it's going to happen in the Permian Basin. There's nowhere else in the world that you have such a concentrated location of resources, expertise, and land anywhere in the world. The Bureau of Economic Geology here tells me that it's the most energy-intensive place in the world. It's all right there. And you have university lands out there, which could be, if they'd agree to it, the living laboratory for UT to go out there and test technologies, test research. But UT is the key. You're in the center of it because Texas is Texas. UT can lead it. UT has land on university lands. UT has 450 energy researchers that the Energy Institute brings together to solve, what do they call it? The grand challenges of energy. That's really, in my mind, UT and the Energy Institute's role within UT is to address the grand challenges of energy, which we face now more than any other time, 5 years, maybe. So if you all are interested, I mean, you're here, so you're interested in the Energy Institute, but it's very uniquely positioned to bring all of that brain power of 450 energy researchers and corporations and the public sector and some philanthropy together to address and create real solutions to those grand challenges.
Thank you. Thanks, Marilu. Thanks so much.
Sure.